just want, before we start, just to give you something I said in last week's reading. The first mitzvah that was given to the Jewish people, as a Jewish people, although we were not at Sinai yet, was the mitzvah of the sanctification of the new moon. HaChodesh hazeh lochem rosh chadoshim. This month should be for you the first of the months, and this is we sanctified the month of Nisan, and that's considered the first month because the Jews themselves, on the 10th of the month, were meant to take the Paschal lamb, the goat or the sheep, to be slaughtered on the 14th and to be eaten on the 15th. HaChodesh hazeh lochem rosh chadoshim. Now, the Torah writes the word HaChodesh hazeh lochem. This month is for you. What is lochem? So the Sefarno points out that until this point, the Jews basically had no bechira. We are not fully in control of our lives up to this point. We cannot exercise our free will. It's only from this point going onward, because this is already the beginning of the release, of the redemption, although the actual redemption didn't take place till we left on the 15th morning. But we're able to sense that we have control of our lives. Or you can say, HaChodesh hazeh lochem. During this month, you will have bechira. You will have free will, free choice. 15th, you leave. You're ready. You're on your ascent to Sinai. You're actually removing the shackles of impurity, which are the Mem Tes Shari Tuma, the 49 levels of impurity. That's the Sefarno. The Balaturim points out, lochem and the word melech is the same word, same letters, right? If you rearrange the words, lochem and melech are the same letters, king and for you. Meaning that when do you start exercising that level of independence, like the melech, the king, that you have control, you're the one who dictates, so to say. You're no longer dictated to, you're no longer the subject, you are the king. That's during this month. You become melech. So when I saw the Balaturim, the first thing came to mind, there are a number of mitzvos that you must own the species, otherwise you do not fulfill the mitzvah. For instance, the Torah tells us regarding the mitzvah of lulav, the 4 species. Torah says, "Ulakachtem lochem biyom harishon." Right, Pri Tzodor, Kapos Tamorim, the esrog, the palm branch, the myrtles, and the willow, 4 species. Ulakachtem lochem. So the Gemara tells us what's lochem. Financially, you must own it. You cannot be yotze with a borrowed lulav unless the person transfers to you as a gift. But if it's only borrowed, you're not yotze. It's only lochem. It must be yours. What's lochem? What does lochem represent? Ownership. Ownership represents that's independence. I have my own identity. That's lochem. That's melech. We find by matzah at the Seder, you must own the matzah. I mean, even if you eat at another person's house, for the Seder, it's understood if he gives you the matzah is meant to be yours. So therefore, the matzah yotze with is your matzah. It's lochem. That's melech. At the Seder, what do we re-experience? Bondage to redemption. What's redemption? That's that independence. We're no longer subjects of masters. We are the masters. The whole concept of leaning at the Seder, that's demonstrating that we're free men. Okay? This is HaChodesh hazeh lochem. Bechira, as the Sefarno says, during this month, at the 15th of the month, we became free men because the Gula took place the 15th morning when we left Egypt. That's Lochem. At the Seder, which is the 15th at night, what do we project and portray and demonstrate? Cherus. Me'abdus l'cherus. That's the Seder. To retell and recount and re-experience, as we say during the Seder, based on the Posuk, Chayav Odom Lirus Es Atzmo Kidu Yotz Mitzrayim. Every Jew has to see himself as if he left Egypt himself. That he himself is a beneficiary of the redemption. That the shackles of impurity were broken from us also. We are beneficiaries of that. Okay, that's the introduction to Bishalach. Vahi Bishalach Paro Sa'om. And when Paro sent out the people. So there's a midrash here. Vahi Bishalach. In Hebrew, the word Vai means woe. So the midrash tells us, Vai Bishalach Parasam. Hashem says, woe to me that Paro sent out the people. Why? Because if the Jews would have been able to stay in Egypt longer, which we couldn't, because since we reached that level of impurity, and we would have gone into the oblivion of that at that moment, we had to leave. But if we could have stayed longer, he would have given the Egyptians more plagues. So woe to me that I couldn't bring more plagues upon Egypt. That's the midrash. So the Beis HaLevi goes to explain. We find, it says, V'rachma v'kol masov, the God's mercies on all his creation. I mean, God is like bemoaning the fact that he couldn't bring more suffering on the Egyptians. What is it all about? And the midrash says, Moshe Lamad Davadome, what is it analogous to? There was a person who had kidnapped the prince and had tortured the prince. And they caught the kidnapper, and the king said, give him 100 lashes. And after 5 lashes, the culprit, the kidnapper, dies under the whip. So the king bemoans the fact, he says, woe to me, I wish he would have been alive, that he could have suffered what he deserved to suffer because of what he did to my son. That's the moshel, that's the analogy of the midrash. So the Beis HaLevi explains, as we discussed, every plague had a dual value, a dual purpose. Firstly, the Egyptians deserved to be punished for what they did to the Jews. They enslaved us for 210 years. It's not only the physical bondage, the impurity which we absorbed over this period of time, and ultimately we became the idolaters. That impact of idolatry was not fully purged from us. And he shows from Psukim, because there were still traces of that idolatry, even at a microscopic level, therefore we were susceptible to the influence of the Erev Rav, the rabble, at the time of the Chet Egel, only because of that. And so who is responsible for that? The Egyptians. Every plague that we were exposed to was another dimension of seeing God's hand in creation on a revealed level. So every plague which we saw and we were exposed to actually purged and purified us to a greater degree. We had to leave. The Egyptians deserved to be punished because of what they did to us, embedding us within us this impurity, which ultimately led to the Chet Egel. But God had no choice. At this point, we had to leave. Because if we wouldn't have left then, we would have gone to spiritual extinction, into the oblivion. So Hashem says, Vai, woe to me that I had to send them out at this point. Because if they could have remained longer, if they could have, they would have been exposed to more miracles, to more plagues. And if they would have been exposed to more plagues, ultimately, they would have been fully purged and it would have never come to the Chet Egel. But because they were holding at this point where they had to leave, therefore, ultimately, it led to the disastrous event known as the Chet Egel.